John Penrose.
Mr Deputy Speaker, it's always a pleasure to follow the gentleman from Edinburgh East, and I should probably start with a declaration of interest, as my wife is a fairly recently appointed life baroness in the Lords. I should probably add, for the benefit of those opposite, that I believe she is now reconciled to the fact that before she was appointed I had voted repeatedly to abolish people like her. And it would be rather self-serving if I changed my mind now. I hope everyone would agree. I'm happy to inform the House, Mr Deputy Speaker, that we're still talking even so. But while I instinctively support Lords reform, I'm afraid I oppose this motion today. Why? Because it uses Lords reform not as a dead cat, but as an excuse to delay boundary reform, a much-needed and overdue improvement to the plumbing of our democracy. Our current constituency boundaries, as we've heard, are based on voter data which is already 15 years old or more. If we don't reform them now, they will be 20 years out of date by the time of the next general election. And because the old boundaries produced constituencies which varied tremendously in size, it meant that votes in one part of the country carried far more or far less weight than votes in another. Mr Deputy Speaker, it is a fundamental principle of our democracy that everybody's vote must count the same as their neighbours. It doesn't matter whether you are rich or poor, what colour your skin may be, what God you worship. My vote carries no more weight than yours, Mr Deputy Speaker, and yours is worth no more than Nicola Sturgeon's. If without that, our elections will not be fair. I'll have to give way once in order to not to...
Thank you very much. I'm just wondering if he's in fact making an impassioned plea for proportional representation.
Not at all, Mr Deputy Speaker. I'm making an impassioned plea for equal-sized constituencies and for votes to weigh the same. I can think of nothing more dangerous for our democracy, nothing more corrosive of trust in politicians and the political system than a sense that some favoured voters get a better deal than others in other parts of the country. So votes, I really must continue, I'm afraid. So votes must carry equal weight. But without boundary reform, they won't. And anyone proposing delays to the reform will inevitably face the challenge, unfair and unworthy though I'm sure it will be in the honourable gentleman's case, that delaying reform has a party political advantage too. Because many smaller constituencies have historically been in areas with lots of Labour and in some cases SNP MPs. So it has historically required fewer voters to elect Labour MPs than Conservative ones. In other words, Mr Deputy Speaker, some people, not all, but some, want to delay boundary reform because they want to hang on to a system which gave them unfair, unearned, unjustified and undemocratic privilege. They won't admit it in public, of course, but that's what's behind it. So I say to those people, particularly those in the political parties which have proud and distinguished traditions of progressive politics, of standing up for what is right against the forces of reaction who oppose reform, please think very carefully before you vote to delay boundary reform, for you will lay yourselves open to the charge of putting party advantage ahead of democratic principle and fair elections. If I, as a Tory, can vote for fair elections, then so can you. Linking reform of the undemocratic Lords to separate much-needed reforms for fair elections to the democratic commons is just wrong. It's a recipe for endless delay and will only fuel the cynics who believe the whole system is fixed against them. The referendum vote on June the 23rd was, in part, a howl of frustration, a cry of rage against an unfair system where some favourite electors' votes count more than others. And the sight of MPs voting to hang on to a cosy, unfair system will only make things worse. It will corrode trust in our democracy even further. So I urge, even at this late stage, Mr Deputy Speaker, the SNP to withdraw this motion as fast as possible.